Good morning. We are learning the Sikha from Chelek Yud Parshas Pinchas, and its connection to Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. We're learning in the Schos of Refuah Shlema for Harav Yosef Yitzchak ben Sima Chasya. It is most often a difficult choice as to which Sikha to do from the two that the project puts forth for every week. And it was difficult again this week. And I hope that I chose correctly in conformity with what most of you would want to do, chose to do the one that further deepens our understanding of Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. And I figured it's a set, because 2 weeks ago we did Gimel Tammuz as opposed to Yud Beis Yud Gimel. Last week we deepened our understanding of Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, and this week again deepening and broadening our understanding of the Chag HaGeula of the Frierdiker Rebbe and everything that he stood for. So again, from Chelek Yud Ches, Parshas Pinchas, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. Yud Gimel Tammuz was yesterday. Aleph, Sif Aleph. Yemei HaGeula Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz D'Shnas Tafresh Pei Zayin. The days of redemption, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was freed from prison and from the terrible communication of his to death, God forbid, on Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz of the year 1927. Shebehem Yatzachik Meir Chami Admar Lecheres Mima'asarei Cholu B'Yom Shlishi U'Revi'i Shel Parshas Pinchas. So the days that the Frierdiker Rebbe left prison occurred on Tuesday and Wednesday of Parshas Pinchas in the year 1927. The Kach Gam B'Negei Yom Huladatei, and the same thing, because of course Yud Beis Tammuz is also the birthday of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and that was Yud Beis Tammuz Tafresh Mem, Yud Beis Tammuz 1880. Omar Chayk Mari Chami Admar, my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, said, Asher Bizman Shekorim B'Teres Parshas Pinchas Neiladati, that I was born when Parshas Pinchas is read. The Ruba Deruba had Dehamorai Shakaru Imi Usvivi, and most of the events that happened with me and surrounding my life, Mirumazim Behelem Ubigilui Beparshas Pinchas, are alluded to either in shrouded fashion, in concealed fashion, or in revealed fashion in Parshas Pinchas. So Frierdiker Rebbe said about himself that he is connected to Parshas Pinchas, and that what goes on in Parshas Pinchas, really, his entire life is alluded to in this parsha. Behind who this means. Shegulasai v'avodasai v'inyanov bichlal. This means that his redemption and all of his spiritual service and everything about his life, generally speaking, yesh lahem kashar haduk iminyane Pinchas, have a very strong connection with Pinchas. Asher al Shmoy nikreis haparsha, and of course our parsha is called Pinchas. Ukemerumbas gam bazeh, and this is also hinted at. This is also alluded to in the fact Asher Shmoy Hasheni shel Bal HaGeula Yitzchak, that the second name of the Bal HaGeula, which is Yitzchak, who begematria Pinchas kedeisa b'Zohar. The Zohar explains that Yitzchak has the same gematria as Pinchas. And the fact that these two names have the same gematria, hu raya al shaychus pnimis v'dimyon b'neihem, this is a proof of an innermost connection and a similarity between Pinchas and Yitzchak. Ubefrat kasher gematria muvas b'Torah. And this is especially so because this is not a gematria that somebody figured out later, but this is a gematria that's brought down in Torah, specifically in the Zohar. And in like fashion, we see the connection between Pinchas and the first name of the Bal HaGeula, Yosef. Shahare Pinchas hu mizara de Yosef, because we know that Pinchas came from the seed of Yosef. He's a descendant of Yosef. How so? Kad Goshas HaKosov, because the pasuk tells us the Elazar ben Aharon, that Elazar, the son of Aaron, lokach loy bibnois Putiel, he took a daughter from the family of Putiel, and Putiel is a reference to the house of Yosef, Mizera Yosef, shepitpeit beyitzrei. Putiel is etymologically linked with the word pitpeit, which means that Yosef struggled and overcame his Yetzirah. This is talking about the wife of Potiphar. And the Elazar ben Aaron look at Putiel loy leisha vateled loyes Pinchas. So Elazar took a daughter of Putiel to be his wife, and she gave birth to Pinchas. So we know that Pinchas comes from the seed of Yosef. And because we see that the Frierdiker Rebbe's second name has a very clear and revealed connection to Pinchas, Pinchas begematria Yitzchak, they have the same numerical value. But the connection between the first name Yosef and Pinchas is more concealed, it's more shrouded. Pinchas because it's not clearly alluded to in the name Pinchas. We have to say, we have to infer from this that the main work of the Baal HaGeula is connected to the energy of Yitzchak. And how it's correlated with Pinchas. Masha Einkein, a contradistinction, Hanekudak Shor L'Shem Yosef, the point of the Frierdiker Rebbe's life and his work that's connected to the name Yosef, he behelem Yosef, is more concealed. Okay, that's Seif Aleph, that there is a very strong connection between the Frierdiker Rebbe and Parshas Pinchas, not only that he was born in that parsha, not only that he was redeemed, many, some years it comes out in Parshas Pinchas as well, but in the year that he was redeemed, it was Parshas Pinchas in 1927. But not only that, but there's a correlation between his names and the name Pinchas. Yitzchak is the gematria of Pinchas, same gematria. And Yosef, the connection is that Pinchas was from the seed of Yosef Tzaddik, Beis. What is the very, very logical connection between Pinchas and Yosef Yitzchak and the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Baal HaGeula? What's the very, very revealed connection? Shenekudas Maisa Pinchas, he Maisa Kanos, because what is Pinchas most known for? Like if you had to say what's his main characteristic, it's that he was zealous. Like the Torah says, Bekanoi eskin asi, he zealously extracted my vengeance. Umaisa hakanos de Pinchas mitzat halacha. And where do we find what Pinchas did in halacha? We find that it says habaya laramis, that somebody who has intercourse with a non-Jewish woman, kanoin poikin by, those who are zealous strike this person. Now, the thing about this is that it's einai halacha v'din haniskorim b'shulchan aruch. It's brought down in the Gemara, but it's not a halacha that is mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, kechiyuv hamutal al adam, as an obligation that is placed upon every person. Sharei kanoi, because actually it says that when you have a zealous person, haba limolech, and he wants to do a zealous action, ein moirin lei, you don't instruct him to do it. So what Pinchas did was something that you would not instruct most people to do. Yes, Sir Al-Kain, and even more so. It's not only that you don't instruct a person to do this, it's not even in the category of what you would instruct even a zealous person to do. But rather, it's something for which there is an allowance. In other words, there's a difference between something that you're instructed to do, and then there's things that you're not permitted to do. And then there's something for which there is an allowance. So not only is this not something that you would instruct anybody to do, even a zealous person, but it's there's an allowance. And in like fashion, it was the same thing with how the Frierdiker Rebbe comported himself. Bekanoi eskinasi, that he zealously extracted the vengeance for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mesiras nafshay al hachzakas haTorah v'chizuk hayadus b'medina hahi. He had tremendous self-sacrifice to strengthen the Torah and strengthen Yiddishkeit in that country. Asher hivia l'ma'asarei, and this brought to his being incarcerated. And this was, in a way, haisa eifin kazeh shel mesiras nefesh she'ein olav kol chiyuv al pidin. There was nothing in Jewish law that would obligate the Frierdiker Rebbe to take these actions. Ein marin b'ay. You would not instruct anyone to do this. Ve'eina ela inyan shebegeder reshus biyadai. It's something for which there's an allowance, but it's not something you would ever instruct anybody to do. U'kameisha matzinu b'halacha, and the Rebbe says, like we find in halacha, asher mesiras nefesh she'eina al gimel hadvarim diyerik ba'al yavar, that when you have a situation of mesiras nefesh that is not for the three mitzvahs for which you have to kill yourself rather than trespass, which would be idol worship, murder, and adultery. If it's not for those three things, ela al shar mitzvahs lo yisaseh, or mitzvahs haseh kiyetzibazeh, but it's on another thing that a Jew is prohibited to do, or it's something that a Jew is instructed to do, eina chiyuv v'tzivuy ela hareshus biyadei. It's not an obligation. It's not a commandment. There's allowance to do so. And I want to explain that if non-Jews are asking Jews to do something publicly and it's a time of religious persecution, then there is an obligation. We're talking about a time where it's in private, where a Jew would be asked to do something that contravenes halacha. They don't have an obligation to go on mesiras nefesh, but harishus biyadai. But there's allowance for it, like there was for the Frierdiker Rebbe's work in Russia. That was certainly tremendous risk-taking and could and should have led to his death. Gimel. Ela sheyesh lishol. But in drawing this parallel between Pinchas and the Frierdiker Rebbe, we could ask, Ha'hashva hanal shayeches beikar l'seif Parshas Balak. Drawing this parallel between the Frierdiker Rebbe and Pinchas, it would seem, really belongs to the end of Parshas Balak. Ashasham misupor oides avodas Pinchas b'may sakana shaloi o k'kfiyas kama v'kama reiv hashanim sheyem huledis b'mei ha'geula yud beis yud gimel Tammuz cholim b'shavua to Parshas Balak. The Rebbe says that it would seem that drawing this parallel between the Frierdiker Rebbe and Pinchas really belongs in Parshas Balak, which, by the way, most years Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz comes out in Parshas Balak. Umahi hashayches gam l'nyani Pinchas kafi sheva murim beParshas Pinchas. So, what's the connection between the Frierdiker Rebbe, between Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, and what is spoken of in Parshas Pinchas? V'yuvan, and we'll understand this b'haktim, by prefacing first, explaining and talking about hamivor b'Yerushalmi, what is explained in the Gemara in the Yerushalmi. Shemasa Pinchas haya sheloi b'rtzain chachamim, that what Pinchas did was against the wishes of the chachamim, and actually ubikshu lindaisai, and they wanted to put him into a cherem, they wanted to put him in nidui. They wanted to excommunicate him for what he did. If not for the godly spirit that jumped forth, that came upon him, Va'amra, and said, and like the pasuk says in yesterday's chitas, that he and his children until the end of time will be considered part of the priesthood. If not for that, they would have excommunicated Pinchas. But Hashem ratified the fact that what he did was correct by gifting him and his children after him the kahuna. And in case you're wondering, because it says Pinchas was the son of Elazar, so why didn't he have kahuna for him and his children until the end of time? So Rashi explains that only Aaron and his sons who were initiated into the kahuna, that first generation, would have priesthood that would run through their patrilineal line until the end of time. But since Pinchas was not inaugurated as a kohen in that first strata, so he and his children would not have automatically had this. But because of what he did, this came as a reward. When the Chachamim saw this, they did not excommunicate him. So from this, we could understand the greatness of what he did. He knew that what he was doing would contravene what the Chachamim wanted. He knew that there was no place, according to strict Torah law, for his behavior. So that means so his avenging the honor of Hashem was actually a profound Mesiras Nefesh. The Leirak Mesiras Nefesh beguf, Elagam Mesiras Nefesh mitzadat hashama. It wasn't just that he endangered his life, but he endangered his spirituality. Because he knew that this was against their will, and it was so much against their will that they sought to excommunicate him until the Eibishter kind of stopped it. I can't pass up footnote 26. So usually we don't do this, especially in a sikha that's not very short, but I think you'll enjoy this. So footnote 26, the Rebbe says, I want to mention, Mikama Sipurim al Dvar HaBal Shem Tov v'Talmida v'Talmideha HaMagid Shemesiras Nefesh Shalahem Haya Ad La'ofen Shefkiras Olam Haba Shalahem B'Shvil Toivas Yehudi. I want to mention that there are many stories of the Baal Shem Tov and his students and the students of the Magid, Harav HaMagid, that they had so much Mesiras Nefesh that they were willing to give up their Olam Haba for another Jew. But now look at this. And there's a well-known story, I didn't know it, of the Alter Rebbe, Bichul Chasidus, Shenisraf, that there was a booklet of his Chasidus that got burned. And on this booklet, Hayakosov Olav, Biksav Yad Kachay, Admar Zakin, Becherim Bazeh Ubaba. The Alter Rebbe wrote on it that anybody who's going to read this booklet of Chasidus is going to be in a chair. And after the booklet was burned, Bikesh Rabbeinu Hazakin and Mishu Ayin Boy. Alter Rebbe asked, did anybody learn this sefer? Ba'al she'elas Admar Himsoi Harik Kasafta Becherim Bazeh Ubaba. So the Mittler Rebbe said to his father, wait, you wrote that whoever is going to learn this is going to be in a cherem. And it means also they're going to lose Olam Haba. Where's the Mesiras Nefesh on Chasidus? So you lose your Olam Haba, so you lose your Olam Hazeh. But where's the Mesiras Nefesh to learn Chasidus? It's a Meredika story. So, to go back into the pnim of the Sikha. So Pinchas knew very well that what he was doing would endanger his spiritual stature. Va'afal pikein, and nevertheless, kishara she'ira maimud amatzav devayeshav Yisrael b'shittim. The Torah tells us where Bnei Yisrael were, in a place called Shittim, but Rashi tells us right away that Shittim is etymologically linked to the word shtus. Ein adam oiver avera ela im kein nichnas by ruach shtus. That for Bnei Yisrael to do what they did, and in general for a Jew to sin, there has to be this spirit of folly, of stupidity, of idiocy that enters us and makes us sin. So when Pinchas saw what the situation was already, and then he saw that there was a plague that was sweeping through the Jewish people, what does his his self-sacrifice of his body and his soul together. What do both even count if he has the ability to stave off Hashem's wrath from upon Bnei Yisrael? Dalet. Hanhaga kizu dekana is kinasi ba'ifin shel mesiras nefesh he mitzad etzem hanefesh shel ish Yisrael. This kind of behavior to avenge Hashem's vengeance in a way that requires such a level of mesiras nefesh, this comes from the essence of the neshama of a Jew. Asher hi b'shor shelamayla me'atayr. And the Rebbe taught us this last week that the etzep neshama of a yid, the neshama of a yid, its source, its shorish is higher than the source of Torah. And therefore, it's higher than any parameters and any limitations and any rubrics, than any laws of the Torah, as it were. And therefore, his reward, Pinchas's reward, came in a way that also transcended the norms and what was supposed to be Al Pi Torah. Like we already said, that Al Pi Torah, his children should not have inherited priesthood because he wasn't in that first cohort of Kohanim for whom it would be something that was La'elam. But Pinchas got this as a reward. And this is an inyan that transcends the parameters of Torah. The Al Pi Torah, HaKohuna hidavar haba b'Yerusha me'av livnoi, u'me'achar shepinchas atzmai terem niskayin lo haya ze yachal la'aba l'zara acharav v'goymer. And we know that Al Pi Torah, Kohuna comes in the patrilineal line, and it's inherited from father to son. But again, before Pinchas became a kohen, he did not have this. Only because he was zealous for Hashem. Because his type of kanos was with mesiras nefesh. It was elikov. It was higher than all the parameters of Torah. Al kain nasan like Kadosh Baruch Hu kahuna loy ulazare acharav. Therefore, the Eibishter rewarded him with kahuna for him and for his children until all time. Although, according to the rules of Torah, there would not have been place for this. Al pizem, move on. Through this, we understand. Shedavka beparshas Pinchas. So now we're answering the question the Rebbe asked: what's the connection between Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, between the Baal HaGeula and Pinchas? It would seem that the connection would be in Balak, because it's at the end of Parshas Balak that we see the mesiras nefesh that Pinchas did, which correlates with the mesiras nefesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe. But the Rebbe says no, it's Davka Parshas Pinchas, Sheba Oimim Divrei Kadosh Baruch Hu, where we find the words of Hashem, V'haisa lo yulazare achra bis kuhunas olam tachas asher kina lalekav v'chaper al bnei Yisrael, where we find these iconic words that it will be for him and his children afterwards, the covenant of priesthood forever. And this is because he was zealous on behalf of Hashem, and because of him, all the Jews were atoned for. It's only in this parsha that is revealed the level of kanaos, of zealousness that Pinchas had. Mitach mesiras nefesh begufay b'nishmasay. It was a zealousness that included mesiras nefesh, that came from mesiras nefesh, both bodily and in soul. Asher mivli habeit al kach. Pinchas did not reckon with the fact that it went against what the Chachamim wanted, so much so that they would have put him in nidui, they would have excommunicated it. But Pinchas did it because he knew that it conformed with the celestial will, with what Hashem wanted, which is higher than the Torah. Now, don't try this at home. Obviously, Pinchas was able to do this, but, it's not, even the Chachamim were upset with him. Hey, al derech zeh matzinu gam etzel bal ha'maiser ha'geula. And in similar fashion, we find concerning the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was incarcerated and then freed. Not only was he Meiser Nefesh himself bodily for spreading Torah and strengthening Judaism behind the Iron Curtain, Gam al inyonim ke'elu ashal pitar ein chiyuv limsar sa nefesh aleim u'kanal she'ein marim lei. And like we said, like the Rebbe said earlier, he had Mesiras Nefesh, and the Rebbe spoke about this in last week's Sikha, on things that you would not be instructed to have Mesiras Nefesh for them. And last week the Rebbe explained that in the main, the authorities actually arrested him for what he was doing with small children, and they're not bar chiyuva, they don't have a chiyuva limit. But it wasn't only that he was Meiser Nefesh physically for things that nobody would have instructed him to do, as it were. But what he did not align with the opinion of a number of Gedolei v'Chachmei Yisrael, of great Torah leaders of that time. Shaloi hevinu, they didn't understand. And therefore they did not agree to his behavior. And they comported themselves differently. And like we said about Pinchas, that the Chachamim were not aligned with what he did. And then the Rebbe says that it's Mesiras Nefesh of every sort, and it also includes other Jews. So remember last week the Rebbe taught that the Frierdiker Rebbe had Mesiras Nefesh of different kinds, in different places, at different times, and that the great Mesiras Nefesh was involving other Hasidim. But there's another point that the Rebbe mentioned last week, and the Rebbe is underscoring here. What he was doing for young children with the Chadarim endangered everything else. It was a vast labyrinth of maistes, of institutions. There was so many things Frierdiker Rebbe was doing. Like said above, and like said last week, the main gezerah came because of what the Frierdiker Rebbe was doing for children. And so logically, it didn't make sense because he was endangering everything he was doing for adults. Meaning, that along with the Mesiras Nefesh of his physical life, Amad Gam b'Mesiras Nefesh b'Nishmasai, he also endangered his soul. Beruchnius, v'hamid b'Sakana Gam es kol avedasai, and he also endangered all of his work. V'asiba lezehi, and why did he do this? What's the reason? The kivan shamasa b'Medina he naga be'etzem hakim shel Am Yisrael v'shel Yados, because the situation in Russia then touched the essence of the existence of the Jews and of Yiddishkeit. The Frierdiker Rebbe was dealing with a situation where the flame of Yiddishkeit was flickering. It could have been extinguished, God forbid. Therefore, therefore, he did not engage in any logical calculations. He was dealing with just keeping alive, keeping a flame, a flickering flame alive. And so it is with what we're speaking about now, just like what happened with Pinchas. After some time passes, you know how they say there's 20/20 vision in hindsight. So a lot of people are able to see things in hindsight, but only certain people, maybe sometimes only one person, is able to see b'shas ma'isa what's going on at the time. So after some time elapsed, after the Frierdiker Rebbe was freed from prison, nizgal le'ein kol. Everyone was able to see in revealed fashion that he avenged. What he did was for Hashem, and because of this, he was able to bring kapara on all of Bnei Yisrael. Hainu meaning, that this was the proper and the necessary spiritual service for this situation. And in this world too, everybody later kind of retroactively agreed that this was necessary and that should have been done. Ella, in brackets, until the end of the Seif, the Rebbe is going to distinguish between Pinchas and the Frierdiker Rebbe. Ella sha'achiliku, but the difference is she'inin kanoim poigim boy demaisa Pinchas nishar begeder halacha ve'ein moirin lei. That what Pinchas did remained in the category of something you don't instruct anybody to do. But when it comes to the work of the Frierdiker Rebbe, hare etzem hagula hisahayra brura milmaila shezuhi ha'avoda hanachayna umayrin came. The very fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe was freed was an actual instruction, a clear instruction from heaven that this is the proper avodah. And Hasidim remained behind the Iron Curtain, endangering their lives and endangering the lives of their families for decades afterwards. Because the Rebbe says this was a sign that this was the right thing to do. The Frierdiker Rebbe himself instructed his Hasidim to do these things and told others to instruct others to do this. And it was specifically this avodah al pi mesiras nefesh that was higher than any logical calculation. Hechazik es kacheles hayadus bekereb b'nei Yisrael b'medina hahi. This kept the cold, the embers of Judaism alive in that country. Etzlam, for that generation, and for the children that came after, like in an endless chain. But al pizet tuvan gam sheiches Pinchas leYitzchak, kenal shePinchas begematria Yitzchak. And through this, we can now better understand the connection between the names Pinchas and Yitzchak, like said above, that Pinchas is in gematria of Yitzchak. Mekivan sha'efer zed mesiras nefesh kashur el v'nimshach me'akedas Yitzchak b'shleimusay. We can further deepen the connection between Yitzchak and Pinchas when we understand that mesiras nefesh is connected to, and in fact is drawn from Akedas Yitzchak. And Akedas Yitzchak is about Yitzchak in his completion. Mesiras hanefesh de Yitzchak lo ha'isa rak mesiras haguf kipshutai. Yitzchak's mesiras nefesh that he showed on Har HaMoriah, right? He was an adult. He was 37 years old, not like in these stupid cartoons that they show kids in Hebrew school. Yitzchak is a little child. No, he was adult, and he could have easily overpowered his father. He could have easily not gone along. Twice Rashi tells us they went Yishachad b'leiv echad, that Yitzchak agreed to this. So his agreement to be brought as a korban was not just on the physical level that he would be killed, it would be the end of his life. Elagam mesiras nefesh amuka v'nalas yoser beruchnius. But there was a much deeper and higher type of mesiras nefesh. It was a spiritual mesiras nefesh. Not only was his being brought up as a korban opposite of what Hashem had promised, that from Yitzchak will come your seed. But much more than this was the fact that by Yitzchak being brought up as a korban, it would completely uproot everything that Avram Avinu lived for, that he had planted. It would just in one fell swoop eradicate everything that Avram Avinu had taught, including that you shouldn't sacrifice children as sacrifices, which was common in those days. It was to the Melech deity. And also, there wouldn't be somebody to carry on after him. It would completely uproot Avodas Shel Avram v'Yitzchak B'nai. L'farsim Shmoi Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olam. Their work was to publicize, to promulgate the name of Hashem in the world. V'hemshech Am Yisrael B'chlal, and in general, that the Jewish people should have continuity. V'af al pi kain, and despite all of this, Lo zu bilvad sheYitzchak halach l'kayim es tzivui Hashem la'Avraham. Not only did Yitzchak go to fulfill the commandment that Hashem gave to Avram, not to him. Ela shahalach mibli lishol shum she'eles kim belev shalim. But he went without asking questions. He went with a complete heart. Zion. Afal pikein yesh chiluk ben avodas Pinchas la'avodas Bala Geula. Still, there is a difference between the avodah of Pinchas and the avodah of the Bala Geula. And this is alluded to in the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe's names are Yosef Yitzchak, not just Yitzchak. Again, Yitzchak has a gematria of Pinchas, so the connection is very, very clear. But the Frierdiker Rebbe's name is not Yitzchak alone; it's Yosef Yitzchak, and Yosef comes before Yitzchak. The Yuvan, and will understand the difference between Pinchas and the Frierdiker Rebbe al pi hamevor b'Kabbalah v'Chasidus be'inyan hachiluk ben Yosef liYitzchak. So, in order to understand this, we first have to understand what's written in Kabbalah and Chasidus about the difference between the names Yosef and Yitzchak. Asher Yosef b'gematria gimel pa'amim shem ban. So, just very quickly, I'll explain that there are numerous ways in which you could spell out the letters of the Shem Havaya, Yud K, Vav K. And depending on how you spell them out, you get different numerical values, and each one of those numerical values has a different energy, has a different instruction. So the Shem Ban, which is 52, is when you spell out Yud, Vav, Dalet, so each Yud, the Yud is 20. And then you spell Hey with two Heys, Hey, that's 10. So far we have 40. And you spell the Vav with two Vavs, and that's 12. So you have 52. So Yosef is Gematria Gimel Pa'amim Shem Ban. So Yosef is 3 times 52, the Gematria. But Yitzchak is Dalet Pa'amim Shem Ban. Yitzchak is 4 times 52. Will be Isis Pshutis Yeser. And if you don't want to get so Kabbalistic, the Rebbe said, I'll put in simple words. Yuvan hachiluk zeh midivrei hagemara b'negei le'oisias gimel and dalet. You can understand the difference. So we're not going to kech in the Kabbalistic, the gimel times ban or the dalet times ban, but simply speaking, the Gemara explains the difference between gimel and dalet. Gimel dalim. Shahagimel remezes legoim al chasadim. Gimel alludes to doing kindness for another. V'hadalit l'dal, and the dalit alludes to a dal, to a poor person. So Gimel is the one that is doing kindness to the one who is needy, the one who is poor. V'hasbara b'zeh, and the explanation is Teichen hachiluk bein nesinas hatzdaka goimel Gimel ubein kabbalas ubein kabbalasa b'poyel. The difference between the one who's giving tzedakah, the gimel, and the dalet, the one who, practically speaking, accepts the money, hu she'inyan hagoimel hanesina hu hachona el hamaisa. Because the one who's giving can only really prepare. In other words, they can say, I want to give. They can get the money out of the safe. They could write the check. They could put it in their hand. Ve'ilu bidal, kasher ani makabel as a staka bepoil, nifal hamaise bepoil. But it's only when the ani, when the dalet accepts it, practically speaking, that the action is completed. So Gimel bespeaks the modality of preparation, and Dalet bespeaks execution. It happened. Hechiyesa is never sha'ani, that you practically and actually vivified the soul of the poor person who so needed your help. Umizeh muvam b'negeh l'chol hashpa. And we understand this in every overture, in every transaction. Shegimel remezes el hachana b'hashpa, that Gimel alludes to the preparation that is necessary for an overture. Hainu kafishi adayin etzel hamashpia. It's all about what's happening in the producer, as it were. Vidalid, and Dalid al Gemar Hashpa Alidei Makabel. And Dalid is all about what's happening to the participant. It's all about the receiver. It's the practical outcome of the Hashpa. Valder zehu gam ba'adam gufa. And the same process actually plays itself out in our inner landscape. Gimel, Moira al hayeste b'matzav. Gimel is about the preparations we make in our own minds and in our own emotive landscape. And generally speaking, and generally speaking, this bespeaks our intellect and our emotions and the preparations we made. And the conclusion and the practical outcome of all of this, near Mazais, is hinted at be'inyan hadalet, in the idea of the dalet. So preparation versus, you could say, execution or application. Ches. And here the Rebbe deepens this. So now we can understand the Gimel and the Daled, their connection to each other, and how one comes after the other. They're always placed next to each other. Kol hamshacha nichlekes bechlalos l'gimel b'chinas v'kavin shebemekor hamshacha. Because every hamshacha, every effluence, every flow, everything that you want to bring from one place to another is comprised of three modalities, three aspects. There's always a triad. It could be understood in different ways. You could talk about how there's chachma that comes down to chesed and then netzach, or bina that comes down to gevura, to haid, or various different ways, but there's always three aspects. There's always a triad. Ugmar hamshacha, kasher hadavar ba b'maisa b'poel. But the end of this process of preparing to pull something down, kasher hadavar ba b'maisa b'poel, when it actually is applied, when it comes to fruition, hi habachina hadalid, haba la'achar hamshacha shel hagimel. This is about Dalet. This is about the energy of four. And we could see this also in the worlds above. Yeshnam Gimel ha'olamais, Atzilas Bria Yitzira, Va'olam Hadali to Olam Asiya. You have three worlds. You have Atzilas Bria Yitzira. But where are things concretized? Where does it actually come to fruition? Where's the application? That's in the fourth, in the Dalet, in the Olam Hasiya. V'lachein Gimel Meir b'Seit HaSfiros al B'chinas Yisoid. And so Gimel also correlates with the modality of Yisoid, Hamashpia. because Yisoid hakoilel betoichai as kol gimel hakavin, because Yisoid includes in it all the triads that come before it. V'hadalit, and Dalit correlates al spheres hamalchus. Haregel haraviz b'merkava. Malchus is the fourth wheel in the Merkava, Shalamayla, the celestial chariot. Hamashpia b'poil ba'elamais, that brings things down, practically speaking, into the lower worlds. And now we bring it back to what is alluded to in the two names of the Friedrich Rebbe Yosef and Yitzchak, Hamarkivim Yachat Shem Echad, and together they comprise one name. The Dafke Beseder Zeh, and specifically in this order, Yosef, V'achar Kach Yitzchak. First the Gimel, and only then the Dalet. Because both of these inyanim are actually part of one continuum. Yosef hu bechinas Yisoid ki yadua. Yosef is correlated with Yisoid, which is, like the Rebbe just explained to us, mashpia. Hamoira al hachana shel hashba. It speaks to the preparations that must be made in order for there to be output, as it were. V'hamshacha achaba b'poil, until it comes to practical application. Gimel, Gemoil. That's the Indian of Hachana. The Yitzchak mirames al Kabbalas hashpa. And Yitzchak bespeaks the acceptance of the hashpa, the dalet, the dalim. And in our inner landscape, Dalid, Yitzchak speaks to the practicum. And generally speaking, in the avodah that we do in each one of us, inyan ha'achana ad lemaisa bepoil the gimel kolul bechlalos b'madregas nishma. So in our avodah and in our inner landscape, all the preparation, the gimel, until we come to the practicum, can generally be understood as the nishma factor. Understanding things, ruminating on them, analyzing it, thinking about it. V'ilo havoida b'poil, and the practical application, dalid, hi inyan denasa, is when we do it. Tes. Al pi hanal. So based on what we've explained thus far, tuvan gam hashayches bein erfanei mesiras nefesh de Pinchas v'dechoik marichami admor hamudgeshes b'shmeisehem. So now the Rebbe is going back to what he said earlier. He said that as much as we're going to draw correlation and parallel, but there is a difference between the Avodah of Friedrich Rebbe and the Avodah of Pinchas. And in order to understand it, we first have to understand the whole inyan of the differences between the names Yosef and Yitzchak. And now we circle back. The Rebbe is going to explain the difference between their Avodah. Pinchas loy haya nasi hadar. Pinchas was not the leader of his generation. V'loy olav hutal litzabais lachem lelechas b'mesiras nefesh. And it wasn't his to put upon others that they should do mesiras nefesh. Ela hayahu hashaliach shekiyem es ha'maaseh b'poil. He was simply the messenger, and practically he was the one who did the deed. Ve'etzel shaliach sarech sheyudgash beikar inyan dahanasa. And a shliach, more than anything else, has to fulfill the job. They have to do the nasa part. Pinchas, bigematria Yitzchak, bechinas dalid hamim shein ban, v'loy kol ha'achana l'naisa. So Pinchas has the same gematria as Yitzchak, and Yitzchak is dalid times shein ban, and it's all about doing it practically. And it's not so much about the hachana. It's not so much about the inyan of nishma. Asher alula lifamim ligran bilbo b'chule b'kiyum ha'maiseh b'shleimus. Sometimes the nishma part, when we analyze and we think and we ruminate and we postulate and we contemplate, that could actually create a bilbo. It could create confusion. in us doing what we have to do completely. Basically, the shliach doesn't get paid to think. Just like Nike says, just do it. Okay. And because we have this rule that the end of every action is found in the thought that precedes it, meaning that the end of every action is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning is actually higher, and it transcends machshava, it transcends thought, it even transcends what comes before thought. Al kain b'mesiras nafsho shelamayla mehagbalas hatayra palas inin dekane leelikav ubikinai eskin asi. That's why Pinchas, with his mesiras nefesh, that was higher, as the Rebbe explained to us earlier, than even the rubrics of the Torah. That's why he was able to accomplish something so great that the Torah says about him, Hine le'elekov, and Bekanai eskinasi, that he actually avenged Hashem's vengeance. Vahainu, meaning, shehigia ad bechinas tchila hanalis yoser mimash nikva mitzad machshava tchila mitzad bechinas haTorah. He was able to reach a level that's higher than and transcends even the machshava tchila, even the Torah that came, because there's something higher even than that. The Pinchas haisahachana de nishma shakibel minasi hadar Moshe Rabbeinu. Pinchas did have a preparation in the realm of nishma, of learning, of hearing, and he got it from the Nasi Hadar. He got it from Moshe Rabbeinu. Kimerumas bedvarav mikublani mimcha. He said to Moshe, I got this from you. The Rebbe says in a footnote, it's halacha l'Moshe Messinai, that when you see that Aramis, that a Jewish man is being intimate with a non-Jewish woman, you have to strike them. So Pinchas hinted to Moshe, I learned it from you. But although he had a cognitive, intellectual basis, but when he did the deed, all of this was obscured. And what was revealed and what was underscored was just the fulfillment of what has to be done. And in the famous words, which we learned in Rashi, it comes from the Gemara, Kraina de Igrasa, the one who reads the letter, meaning the one who says this is the law, Ihu leve pravanka. He should be the one who should fulfill the edict. The one who reads the edict should fulfill the edict. So Pinchas knew what the law was, so he should do it. Aval etzel nasi hadar asher nasi hu akol. So this is the behavior of a shliach. But when it comes to the nasi, the famous words of Rashi and nasi hu akol, tzrichim liyos v'yeshnam beis ha'inyanim b'shleimusam. There has to be an nasi, and there is both aspects, the Yosef and the Yitzchak, the preparation and the application and the execution. Hein ha'inyan denasa, v'hein ha'inyan denishma. You have to have both the fulfillment, the execution, and you have to have all the intellectual rumination. V'lachein mudgash hadavar b'shma Yosef Yitzchak, and therefore this is underscored in the two names together. The Frierdiker Rebbe, hein ha'achana v'hamshacha denishma. Yosef is about hachana. Yosef is about mashpia. Yosef is about preparation and bringing down. It's about nishma. It's about the intellectual work that goes into the back end of what has to happen before we do something. That's Yosef. Ve'hein kabbalas hashpa. And then there's also accepting this hashpa. There's bringing it to fruition. Ha'ini denasa, bringing it into action, which is the idea of Yitzchak, which is the idea of Pinchas. And we saw both of these things clearly by the Frierdiker Rebbe. Mesiras nefesh al hafatzas hatayr v'yados bekerv kol hasugim b'Yisrael ktanim k'gdolim b'niyas mikvos shlichas rabbanim shachetim mayalim v'chulei v'mkoymesh hayitzayich b'kach Yisayit chadarim avor tinoka shel beis rabban l'limud aleph beis shlichas malamdim v'chulei naaseh. We saw by the Frierdiker Rebbe the whole idea of naaseh. He spread Torah and Yahados amongst all types of Jews. Young ones, older people. He built mikvahs. He sent rabbanim. He sent shachtim. He sent mayalim. He sent them to places where it was necessary. He established chadarim for very young children. He sent malamdim for older children. That's all the nasa. Ule idach, and on the other hand, gam seida hanhaga denishma. We also see the Frierdiker Rebbe's work the whole idea of the intellectual enterprise. Limud v'giluy ha'inyanim ha'mukim b'yoser b'nigla d'Torah. Learning and revealing the deepest parts of nigla and ubepnimius ha'Torah, and the deepest parts of pnimius ha'Torah Chasidus, ad razin de razin. Yud. U'me'inyan zeh miskabelas teisefes hasbara. And through this, we have now deepened and broadened the explanation of the connection between the Bala Geula, Yosef Yitzchak, and the name Pinchas. And we also get a hara, a clear instruction in our work, each one of us. The Frierdiker Rebbe demanded of his shluchim, and he continues to demand of us now. It's an expression from Gemara: grab what you can eat, grab what you can drink, meaning l'mayla mecheshban, in a way that transcends calculation. Just do it. First of all, there has to be Maisa. First of all, there has to be Yitzchak, the Gematria Pinchas. Just do it. Don't sit there and have meetings and make all these calculations and say you're not ready and who am I to do this and I don't know enough. First of all, First of all, you have to go out in the world and you have to try to influence our brothers and sisters b'nei Yisrael l'kayim Torah mitzvos, to keep Torah mitzvos. Afilu misha sheterem hishlimis hachana ro'i l'kach, even those who have not completed the necessary preparations. V'yesh etzloi chisarim b'nishma, and this person has a deficit in the preparation area, in the learning. The Rebbe says they're even missing knowledge in what they're trying to influence somebody else to do. They're not the world expert on tefillin or mikveh or Shabbos or mezuzah or anything else. Mikol makom, nevertheless, nidrash mimenu inyan hanaisa. What's demanded of each one of us is do it. Bitul v'hanachas atzmai avor hazulais. We should self-abnegate ourselves for another Jew. Just like we find with Pinchas, he had Mesiras Nefesh to stave off the wrath of Hashem on Bnei Yisrael. Ubezeh gufa b'pulasei al azulas. Ikar hadgashahi al maise b'poel. And we see that when the Frierdiker Rebbe was dealing with other people, he underscored maise b'poel, practical. Because the deed is the main thing. And just like we find a halacha that the paskim tell us, the hearer lav kedibor, that thinking about something is not like saying it. The hearer lav kedibor dummy, that thinking about something is not compared to saying it. For instance, Vim Kara Kriya Shema b'machshavtoi ubelipoi levad b'chol koyach kavanasoi. Let's say a Yid read Kriya Shema in his mind, in his thought process, and in his heart, and he did it with full intention. He has not fulfilled his obligation, and he has to go back and he has to read Kriya Shema and articulate it. On the other hand, if a Yid said Shema and his heart was not focused towards Hashem, he didn't say it with kavanah, he still completed his obligation. So the Rebbe is bringing this to underscore that by the Frierdiker Rebbe was maisa, just get it done. And especially the Rebbe says, we're standing at the end of Golus. We're standing at the end of the era that is referred to as the Ikvus de Mashiach, where we hear the footsteps. The Ein Hazman Grama Klal Lahamtin Loi Ad Sheyifal Ba'atzmoi Games Hanishma. And we have no time to wait until each person will complete the Nishma aspect of the Avodah. We'll understand everything. We'll be a scholar. Shall we take it from Yad Ba Mashiach? Because Mashiach's coming, take it from Yad right away. So we have to use out every moment to just do and to do with Mesiras Nefesh. The Yeser al Kain, and even more. Because we do this as a shliach of the Nasi Hadar, so because we are a shliach of the Nasi Hadar, so the nishma part we already have from the Nasi. We have it in the Bechina of Yosef. Just like we said that Pinchas said to Moshe, I got it from you. And when you do what you have to do with another person, then the other person also gets the nishma part, because you have the nishma part from the Mishaleach. And this is alluded to in the fact that we said that Yitzchak is the Inyan of 4. Asher Dalid Hulei Rak Revi Elaba B'Shah Gam Sach Kol Harba Ubechlal Zeh Gam Agimel Shalafnezeh. And 4 is not just 4 on its own; it's a sum total of everything that comes before it, including Gimel. And Gimel is the idea of Yosef, of the Nishma part. And through this type of avodah, niska lehizgalos Pinchas hu Eliyahu mevasar geula, will be zeiche to the revelation of Pinchas. Pinchas is Eliyahu. Eliyahu is the one that is the harbinger of the geula. Shagam avodas kshur b'inyan hanaisa, and Pinchas is the inyan of naisa, of doing. Returning the hearts of the fathers through the children, and the hearts of the children through the fathers. The gam geula zu ha-geula ha-revis, and the geula that we're waiting for, the 4th geula, shayeches l'mispar arba l'shani shel geula l'asad lavoi. It's connected to 4. It's connected to the 4 l'shanis that in the Torah we understand are connected to the geula from Mitzrayim, but we're taught, the Rabbeinu Bechaya teaches that it's the 4 l'shanis of geula of la'asad lavoi, Dalit Kaiser Shel Parani Shekash Baruch Hu Asad Lahash Kaises Umas Ha'olam, and the 4 cups of punishment that Hashem will give to drink to the other nations. Ukenegdan Asir Kadosh Baruch Hu Lahash Kaises Yisrael Dalit Kaiser Shel Mechamayis, and paralleling the 4 cups of punishment that Hashem will give the other nations to drink, Hashem will give us 4 cups of consolation, and the Shabib Bekarav Mamash, very, very speedily in our day, like today, mamash. Amen. That's the sicha for today, for Yudalit Tammuz, and although the Rebbe here is underscoring do it, But I think we could also take a lesson, what he said earlier, that by the Frierdiker Rebbe, it was Yosef, it was a combination of learning and doing. And this very much speaks to what we're doing here every week together.
Thank
That
you.
when we learn, we know what to do, and we know how to do, and we know why and when and where, because that's what feeds our, we have to do whether we understand or we don't understand, but feeding our mind and learning the Rebbe's Torah definitely makes it that our doing should be stronger and better and more in line.